Hey everybody, welcome to my channel. This video is going to be about a Zexel, Z-E-X-E-L injection pump. This is a block mounted injection pump. It actually sits down in an opening in the engine block, and these rollers on the bottom right here actually run off of lobes on the camshaft in the engine to actually actuate the injectors. The timing is actually accomplished by a shim that is often mistaken for a gasket that actually sits between this face right here and the block. So it's critical that that shim, that you don't replace that because it's not a gasket. You reuse the shim, same dimension. Unless you're doing a major change to the parts, then you may have to mess with the timing, which is a whole nother can of worms. So this particular Zexel pump came out of my Perkins 400 series 4-cylinder diesel engine that is in my JCB MIDI CX backhoe. But these are very commonly used in quite a different other applications. There's even a very common 3-cylinder version, so you'd actually just have 3 of these rollers that's used in a lot of, I guess, Kubota tractors. So what I intend to do here is just disassemble the pump, clean all the components and put it back together. My particular problem I have is that this rack right here that moves back and forth and controls fuel flow, when I first took it apart, it was very sticky because it was all gummed up from old diesel. This backhoe had been sitting for a number of years unused. The diesel turned to junk and it was causing a problem. And what I have for a problem now is that in the no fuel position, of course the tractor is not supposed to run, but there's spring tension on this from the governor lever that attaches to this pin right here. And that spring tension is supposed to, when the engine is stopped, keep this in the position that will allow fuel to flow. Now, at the same time, mounted on the outside of the block, there is a solenoid. It is the fuel shutdown solenoid. And the way that fuel shutdown solenoid works is it has a spring that actually keeps the plunger out, pushing on this right here to the no fuel or stop position. When you turn the key to the run position, the solenoid is energized, that pin retracts, and then the spring tension of the governor system is supposed to allow this to come back out to the run position so that you can crank the engine and start the tractor. In my situation, what's happening is it's not doing that. It's not coming back on its own. I already verified that the spring in the governor mechanism is pushing that lever back. My suspicion is, judging from all the gunk that I'm seeing around here, that is just like some kind of goop right there, that some stuff is in there and is interfering with the way this is supposed to work. The way this works, we'll see it better once I get it apart, but this bar that's moving back and forth right here, you can see it popping out on that end. Okay, this bar, on the back side of the bar, it has a rack of teeth. The rack of teeth engages teeth on sleeves that are inside each one of these chambers. Each chamber has its own sleeve, and it rotates those sleeves and controls fuel flow that way. Alright, so you'll notice that I have all of my high pressure lines still attached to this thing, and the reason why is because I really couldn't get these high pressure lines disconnected off of this end of the injection pump, because when I went to turn these nuts, that would turn this whole assembly right here, and there was really no way for me to get a wrench on to hold these from turning while turning these, especially down with the way it's mounted with the frame of the backhoe kind of in the way. I could try and break them free right now, but I'm still going to run into the same problem, which is as soon as I get this one done, I then can't get the 19mm wrench that would hold this onto the next one because they're so close together. So I'm going to take that out, but I don't want to take that out until I relieve the spring tension that's going on inside there. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to turn my attention back to this side, and we have a clip right here. It's a metal wire type of clip that wraps around to the back side here. Okay, And what that does, that holds in these 4 pins. So you can see there's 4 pins right here. So I want to remove this wire clip without bending the heck out of it. Okay, so we can see that the end of each one of those pins has a slot in it that clip that I just pulled out will ride in. Now to get these pins out, each one of these roller assemblies has a big spring behind it. It's under spring tension. So if I push in, and by the way, this is like one of the first tests you can do, is you want to make sure that all of them do this. They should all be sticking out the same amount, and they should all have spring tension. If you could push it in and it doesn't come back out, then you've probably got a broken spring in there, or it's binding very badly. If it's stuck in and it's not out all the way like these are, then chances are, again, broken spring, or they're just jammed in there. So what I'm going to do is I have a little tool here that's got a little magnet in the end. So if I push inward and then put the magnet on here, I could pull that pin out. Now with the pin pulled out, carefully I'm going to ease up on the tension and the roller assembly will come out. Now I'm going to keep all of the components from each one of these banks together. In other words, I'm going to have 4 of these little pins. I'm going to keep this pin with this roller and all of its parts and everything else that comes apart. The reason why I'm going to do that is because if there's any chance that any of these parts have weared unevenly, I want to keep them all mated together. Any of these parts that are wearing against each other, I want to keep them together. I also want to make sure I take special attention to take notice of the orientation of how these parts are in there. I mean, some of these parts will only go in one way, but some of them you got to make sure you're putting them in correctly. So we're going to call this the front of the pump, for lack of a better explanation. This is the side that has the rack, and it's the side that has the fuel inlet port. So this roller assembly that I'm about to take out has a slot right here that faces this front area. There is a little, almost like a washer, it's a metal disc, and that's a place for the seat, for the spring to seat onto. So the other side of that is in contact with the roller. So you can see the side that faces out actually has a number on it, 325, and a little dimple right there in the middle, a little mark right there in the middle. So I want to make sure that that's going to go back in the same way when I put it back in. But for now, I can take this and I can tap it like that, and it pops out. And then we see the roller. So again, this side has a little mark on it and has a number. The other side does not. So the side that doesn't have any markings on it is the side that actually faces the roller. While I have this roller assembly out, I want to just kind of give this a little wiggle. Side to side play, feels good. Spins freely. Now if necessary, you can actually push this pin out and pop the whole roller out. So it looks like it's in pretty good shape, but look, there's another one of these little snots of material that I was just talking about. Just wiped it off. I don't know if you caught that or not. Now looking down inside here, we can see that there's almost like a disc style of washer here, and that is made in a way so that it's got a slot so that you can take it off of that rod that's in there if you take the rod out. So now I'm going to pull this rod out. And this goes in a certain way also. So here's that washer I was just talking about, and you can see now that I have it out of the cylinder, I can actually move it down and take it right off. So the cup side or the concave side faces out. So there are two flats on this part. So theoretically, you could insert this way or 180 degrees the other way. But there's a slot on this side, right there. So see that little groove right there? That groove is going to be facing that direction. Again, remembering that I've got the orientation of this pump so the rack is on the back with the fuel inlet fitting. So when I go to put this back in, I can't put it in this way. I have to put it in this way. Again, this groove side here ends up facing that way. Look at the gunk on the end of that thing. Now I should be able to get the spring out. The spring looks pretty symmetrical, so it looks like it doesn't matter which way the spring goes in, and I don't see any markings on it. But just to be on the safe side, I'm going to put it down on my bench with the bottom facing up, so that when I put it back in, I'll know to slide it back in this way as opposed to this way. Alright, now down inside there, you can see a black tube looking thing. That's the thing that's got the gear on it that actually meshes with this rack and rotates as the rack moves. There is a alignment mark on that that has to line up with the mark on the rack when you're putting this back together. You can't see the mark right now because there's actually a metal washer down in there that hasn't come out yet, and that actually is what that spring is resting on. This big spring we took out rests on that. So I just tilted this out and it pretty much falls out. So here is that cup washer that the spring rides in. So obviously the cup side faces out because the spring sits in that. So it's not easy to see. Hopefully it's going to show up on the video here, but there's just a little dot right in this area here, near my finger. So that little dot is what we have to worry about lining up with the line on the rack. The line on the rack is much easier to see. You just kind of see it down in there. It's easy for me to see it. It's hard for me to get a camera angle to see it. But when I pull this rack out to clean it, you'll see them. So now that I've taken this apart to this point on this barrel, I could take this hard line off and this component off. So I got a 17 millimeter wrench and a 19 millimeter wrench. And I've already got these clamps here loosened so they can swing these lines out individually. Yeah, and so then to get the next high pressure line off, I want to be able to hold on to this, but I can't because this is in the way. So I'm going to take this off now. Oh, this was pretty tight. Thin wall 19 millimeter socket will fit on it though. So there's a spring inside here, and you want to make sure you check this O-ring, make sure it's okay. Now you can see this little piston like cup deal here. I'm going to carefully take this out. This is like almost like a copper washer here. So there's a little copper washer that sits on top there. There's this little pin part. And this little cup deal, or piston. So just to be clear, we've got this little component here that rides inside here. Like that. And we've got this little copper washer that would sit on top like that. Now I reach down in here with my magnet again and try and get this part out. Maybe it's going to be just easier to let it fall out this way. There we go. Yep. So that's what this part looks like. This part has this little keyway right here on the side where this little hole is. Camera's not going to focus way down in there, but there is a little pin that sticks out that groove rides in. That rides in that groove on this piece. So if I try and drop this back down in here, so if I just try and put this back in, it won't go all the way down until I rotate it to the point where that slot lines up with that pin. So that's how you'll know that that's in correctly. Alright, so now I can just repeat and do the same thing for the other 3 bays. And again, I'm just going to make sure I keep all the parts together for each individual bank. Again, we just push up, move the pin, and continue on. So now that I've removed all of these bottom components, the parts with the teeth on them, like the parts that actually rotate, I can now slide this all the way out. And you can see the racks, the teeth on the back. Now this is as far as I'm going to break this down. These nuts right here that hold these flange pieces on, and this threaded piece, are special 5-sided nuts. So there's actually a special socket you can get to fit those if you wanted to take those off. For the type of failure that I have here, just with it just needing a very good cleaning, I'm not going to need to get that down and deep into this thing. So, alright, so now I'm going to clean the body of it and all the components, and we'll start reassembly. Alright, I used my ultrasonic parts cleaner and soaked this body for quite a while, and then I cleaned all of the parts individually and reassembled them. I did 3 out of 4. I left 1 so I can show you my method for reassembly of this beast. So we start with the top, putting this assembly back in. You start with this. You drop this spring down inside here. Then we take this part right here. Okay, this has this lip. The side opposite the lip has a beveled edge to the hole. That is the end this goes into. Because you see, it'll fit in either end, but this is wrong. That's got a beveled edge to meet the bevel on this seat. Okay. Then we take this copper washer, drop the copper washer in. Okay. This is going to go into that spring, like so. If you do it right, you should be able to compress it to about that much. Now we set that aside, just like so. We turn our attention to this part right here. Notice there's a notch right there, lines up with this hole. I'm not going to be able to show you because the camera's not going to want to focus down. Actually, you can almost see it down there. There's a pin down there right at the top of my fingernail. You see it? There's a little pin that sticks out just a little bit. That's what that groove has to engage. So I'll tell you what you do to make sure you're engaging it. So how I like to do it. I'm going to take this. Notice the groove is facing up the opposite way the pin is down there. Drop this sucker in like that. So obviously that's not going to be correct because it's not in the groove. Then, if you have long fingers like I do, you reach in here and I can actually put my fingertips on each end and I can slowly rotate this while lightly pushing with this finger. And what's going to happen is I'm going to get to the point where that little groove is going to line up with that pin. And you will feel it move in. Right there. So I just felt it drop in and move in that like 3/16 of an inch or so. Now I know that that's in there correctly. Now, without tilting this up too far so that that falls out of position, and without tilting this too far so that this falls apart on you, I'm going to just bring this over. And I'm going to tighten this hand tight. And if you do this right, it shouldn't fight you. That O-ring should end up just popping down into its little well and disappearing by hand. See? If this is fighting you, then you've got something fell out of alignment or out of place, or you did something wrong. And just get a little snug like that, and that's all you need. Now that end's done. Now we turn our attention to this side. This is probably the trickiest part of the whole reassembly, in my opinion. We got this doohickey here with the gear on it. There is a little dot right there. There is that dot right there, right below this fingernail. Then the trick is, when you're looking down this bore, if you move this rod, this rack back and forth, you'll see a mark on that rod, the part of the rod that's exposed down in there. See it? You can see that little line moving back and forth right there. That's it. I can't get it to focus on there, but you can kind of see it. So we got to get this lowered down in there so that that dot at that tooth lines up with that line on the rack. So that's the tricky part. I'll give you another tip too. On this one over here, number one, the one that is where this pin is, because of the fact that this is open like this, you can get these weird wear marks on this part of the rod, and it'll almost make it look like it'll look like those alignment marks, but they're just wear marks. They're the end of travel. So if that's throwing you off, just look in the next hole over, look in this one that you haven't done yet, and put that line right in the middle, and then you'll see the correct line in the middle there. Anyways, getting back to this. So I can't show you this actually happening because I got to look down the bore, not the camera. So I start by making sure my mark is up here at 12 o'clock, and I grab this with some needle nose pliers like so. I've already made sure that my other mark is right in the middle, and I lower this in. Once I've got it lowered in, I'll shine a light down there, verify that the marks line up. It's not quite seated all the way, but the marks look like they're lining up. One tooth off. There we go. Now that's lined up. Well, it's not going to focus, but You could trust me. It's in. If you have a set of, I have another set of needle nose that I didn't have handy, but they actually work better for this job. And the difference is the needle nose are the type that they get really narrow quick right here. And so it's a little bit better for this job because you kind of end up interfering with the cylinder wall here. But it's in and it's lined up. And that's critical. Once that's in, you take this cup washer, you drop it in with the cup facing up, and that gets followed by this large spring. Now the second tricky part, and the second critical alignment. This thing. So this end with the hole has a little slot in it. You see it right there? See that little groove right there? That little groove needs to go to the left. And that is with the pump oriented with, again, we've got the fuel inlet fitting up top, and this rack connection right here is on the right. So this is the left side when I'm saying it's going to face the left. Notice how this has two flat sides to it. It's a flat side there and a flat side there. I'm talking about this section right here. This goes down into that black tube part of that black gear. So it can only go in one of two ways. It can go in this way, or it can go in 180 degrees this way. But just because it'll go in either of those two ways, the correct way is to make sure that this groove I just talked about is facing left, that way. Now, I just get it started. See how it's sticking out still? See how much it's sticking out past the end here? The reason why I'm doing that and stopping there is because we've got to get this little cup washer on, okay? And there's, if we seat this all the way down in too far, you'll never get this on. Because of the design of this, you have to have this elongated, the wider part of the elongated hole go over, and then this just kind of gets kicked over like that. Okay? Now, without turning this too much, because I don't want to screw up my orientation, I now want this to go all the way down as far as I can. Now here's another trick. When you get down to where you feel a little bit of resistance, grab this rod on the rack here and gently wiggle it back and forth a little bit. There you go. It just popped in. And I can feel, on the end of my thumb, I can feel that twisting back and forth like it's supposed to as this moves. Okay? So it'll look like that if you did it correctly. Next up, we take the roller assembly. Remember we had this disc. This disc has two sides. It has a side that has a number silk screened on it with a little dimple. That's the side that's going to face this rod on the end here. So the side that has no lettering or no markings, that's going to face the roller. So we just pop it in like that. Then we take this whole roller assembly. Remember this groove right here we talked about? This groove right here has to face up and line up with this hole right here. This little locking pin goes in here, but it won't go in right now because you have to push this up against the spring pressure, and then that'll allow this to drop in like so. Once we have all of the pins in, you can then use a screwdriver and turn them all horizontal. And we're doing that because we need to reinstall this locking clip. And the locking clip actually sits right in here. So now I'm just checking to make sure my locking clip's seated correctly. It's in the groove there. It's in all of these grooves. See? That's out right there. There we go. That's it. Then you just move this back and forth, and this should move smooth as glass. You shouldn't feel any binding. So, feels good. Alright, so now we just got to reinstall it in the tractor and test run it.